I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up. Then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back to the Do Hard Things podcast with Lexi and Gabe. Today's guest is Michael Hanson, CEO and founder of Cosmic Growth, a B2B sales training firm on a mission to fix a broken profession. The number that drives him is only 18% of buyers trust salespeople. Michael's a Brit who's lived and worked across 4 continents, scaled Cloud Task from 10 to 200 employees as VP of Growth, and then went out on his own. He built a framework called Cosmic that throws out the commission-chasing, feature-pitching model of selling and replaces it with something more human. He's trained over 10,000 salespeople, from junior SDRs to brokers closing 8-figure deals. His core belief is that most sellers don't have a skills problem, they have a mindset problem. Michael, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Do Hard Things podcast with Gabe and Lexi. Mikey, we just heard your bio. I'm so happy you're here. We've been friends for years, and I'm so excited we've been able to meet up here on the pod and get into it, man. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been waiting for my invite to come on here, so here we are.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, and a new venture as well that you're going through too. Exciting announcements, so a lot to discuss. But before we get into all of the business side of things in regards to what you're doing, talk me through about this origin story. Like, you worked in Colombia and Spain and Germany and South Africa, so it's not a typical path for a sales consultant from the UK. So how did you get into this role? And most people don't go to school for sales. So what's Mikey's story?
Yeah, I studied politics at university, or what you call college over in the States. And I worked in politics for a little bit, actually. So I was a South Africa piece. I was working on an election. It was actually all about cloak and daggers, right? So we were fighting for the opposition. So we were trying to fight for the good guys. So I worked on an election campaign in an African country. And then I think a lot of politics is about like debating, right? The politics has become, quite toxic in the West. So we won't kind of go down that route today. But yeah, I think that gave me a lot of skills of like public speaking and writing and social media. And I actually used to manage a social media account for the treasurer of the opposition, who was like very senior. So I learned a lot of social media with that. It was more of like Facebook back then. We're talking like 2012. And then after that, I ended up working as an account manager. So that was my first kind of more sales role at a tech company in London. Also did quite a lot of marketing stuff there. And I would always hang out with more of like the proper sales guys, like the VPs of sales. And I used to report to a VP of sales, a woman called Siobhan, who's a bit of a mentor to me as well. So she was brilliant. And then after that, I ended up kind of doing sales. And I think, like you said, I never was at like university and being like, yeah, I want to do sales. And I've never been a very like materialistic person as well. So it wasn't a thing of like, hey, I want to like make loads of money and that's why I want to go into sales. But the thing I actually more liked about sales was the communication aspect. And I think the better you become in sales, the better you become in communication. I noticed like even with my like family or my wife or friends or whatever, you become a better listener and all this stuff. So that was kind of my journey. And then I was in a similar world to you for a while in Colombia with outsourcing, where I worked for a company that had about 300 outsourced BDRs down in Colombia. I was a VP of growth, so more running the sales and marketing team. We were trying to get new business. And that eventually led me to starting my own company in 2019, training salespeople, because I saw that a lot of our clients, their sales teams were awful because we were booking meetings and they weren't able to close any of them, which I'm sure is a problem you see on your side as well. So that's kind of the quick 360 in my career. Oh.
Such a great story, and I know traveling the world is such a dream for so many people, and it's incredible that you got to go to all of these places. How did that international life shape the way you really think about people, relationships, and selling to others?
Yeah, I think a big part of Colombia's story, again, I don't want to get too deep into the history, but Colombia's had a lot of like problems politically. Obviously, everyone knows about drug issues and Pablo Escobar and that stuff. Even way beyond that, there's been a big civil war that happened in the country, and they kind of came out of it really. And there's still some issues, but in the last decade. So I arrived in Colombia in 2000 and trying to think the exact year. I think it was 2017. I lived there for about 3 years. And the thing I really loved about Colombia is I found like people are super resilient there. So like almost everyone I spoke to had a story of something that had happened to one of their family members. And some of the stories were absolutely shocking and harrowing, but the way they almost looked at it was part of their, Gabe was saying the origin story, part of their origin story. And it was just something that made them stronger. And I think that's a really good skill in sales because you need to be resilient, right? And if you get knocked down, get back up. And I was actually really inspired by Colombia just as a country and the resilience stories. And so when I was out there, making cold calls and trying to get new business and getting rejected, like we all do in business and sales, I kind of the stories I would hear would inspire me a bit because I was like, oh, my life's not that tough. I'm just, calling this guy in Denver or whatever. So what if he's a bit angry? It's there's a lot worse things happening in the world.
Right, exactly. So let's get into business, man, because you founded an amazing company, Growth Genie, in 2019, as you mentioned, and you just recently went through a rebrand to Cosmic Growth. What was that founding moment? What were you frustrated with that you were deciding to fix? What is the problem that you guys are solving right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. As you said, I started the business 2019, which is 7 years ago. I don't know how all that time has flied so quickly, but the problem actually has stayed the same, but the cause is different. So the problem, my elevator pitch has always been, Lexi, Gabe, you as executives, as leaders in your companies, you're getting thousands of emails, LinkedIn messages, spam, most of which is totally irrelevant to you. And our job with our training and enablement is to help your salespeople stand out from everyone else and stand out from the junk. Now, the interesting thing, the cause of that spam in 2019 was more like automation technology, right? Your sequencing tools, etc. Fast forward 7 years, the problem is now AI, right? So that spam is just even worse because everyone's using AI and everyone's just doing what we call the spray and pray approach, which they were doing in 2019, but they're just doing it with a different tool. So that's really the problem we're trying to solve. And I think the only thing that's also different in terms of what we offer is we think AI is great. We think it's great for a lot of things. We think it's really good for research. We think it's really good for editing. We think it's really good for like data and analysis and all this stuff. But you need to work out what can AI not do. AI does not have your experience, right? Everyone's life experience. So both of you have, lived different lives and been in different locations and families and all this stuff. And that's also the thing we talk about is like, even if you're pitching to a CFO is still a human, right? They go to movies, their families, they like sports, etc. So it's trying to like connect on that level. And AI is not able to do that, like human to human interaction. It is able to do the research, but you need to take that research and make it your own. And that's a lot of what we train on as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when doing research for this show, one stat that really stood out that was on your profile is that only 18% of buyers trust salespeople. In your view, who's responsible for that? The sellers, the companies that are training them, or just the structures that reward that behavior?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question about who's to blame. I think it's both. So I think it's both the salespeople and the management. Because I think as a salesperson to say, hey, my manager's to blame, the product's to blame, etc. We train a lot actually on the psychology of sales, and we try to get salespeople to avoid what I call the victim mindset, which is, oh, hey, I never get any leads from marketing, or hey, my product is rubbish, or hey, etc. And I've noticed a lot of great salespeople we train. We also train a lot of corporate real estate brokers who are essentially sellers between landlords and tenants, and a lot of them come from like sports backgrounds, because in sports you have to be disciplined and you can't like blame anyone else, right? If you're not performing, you kind of got to blame yourself. So I think sellers have to take accountability, but of course leaders also have to take accountability. And I think one of the reasons I've done quite well in my business, when I set up my business, I was a one person trainer, and I never really meant to set up a business, but it was just there were so many people doing training wrong that's the reason I grew into a company. And what I found is a lot of like sales management is basically just looking at the CRM and saying, hey, you've not hit your number, like what's going on, versus thinking, why have you not hit your number? I'm going to listen to a discovery call. Or for SDRs, I'm going to listen to a cold call. I'm going to identify what the problems are and coach the person. So I think there's a real lack of coaching a lot of the time in sales. And I think that's like a really big problem that happens from leadership level.
I mean, you just said something so profound, but you don't even realize it because you just the way you talk is just like amazing. You coach the person, and
Yeah.
that's what I think is so wrong right now, and why you are so good at what you do is that's how you approach it. You've also said things like, most salespeople have a spiritual problem, not a skill problem. That's pretty
Yeah.
provocative framing, right, in B2B sales, right? So what do you actually mean by that? And how do you say that in a full of a room of skeptical sales leaders without losing them
Yeah,
immediately?
yeah. I do give I kind of call out, we call this a spiritual problem, but you may call it an emotional problem, a psychological problem. Like, 'cause
Right.
I know spiritual is a word that freaks some people out. So I always have that kind of asterisk in my speech as well. But yeah, what I mean by that is a mindset piece, right? So a big one I always say is when I do a training, imagine I'm doing a cold call training, and I say to the room, hey, what do you think is the goal of a cold call? Normally someone puts their hand up and it's like, the goal of a cold call is to book a meeting. And I say, eventually, but the first goal of a cold call is to learn something new about the other person. Because if you make a cold call, book a meeting with someone who's actually just trying to get you off the phone is a no-show. That is much less of a success than you book a meeting. Let's just imagine you sell to an operations director. The operations director says, look, I'm not the right person, but here are 3 problems we're really struggling with. I think we need help with. You should contact the CEO. You call the CEO, you've got the 3 problems, right? So that's like a mindset thing of if you're learning new information, new goals, etc., you're going to be more successful. So to me, that's a spiritual problem, because a spiritual problem, a lot of the reason people hate salespeople, going back to that only 18% of buyers trust salespeople, is they're like, oh, this salesperson only cares about commission. They only care about themselves, right? And there's a lack of curiosity in the other person. So I think the spiritual aspect is like really showing you care about the other person, and from your own mindset of like, don't attach your self-worth to any one deal or any one cold call, right? Because you're going to set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, definitely. And you list the symptoms clearly: pitching features instead of solving problems, blasting generic emails, giving copy paste demos, hiding behind email because they're scared to pick up the phone. Which of these do you think is the most damaging, and why is it so hard to break through that?
Yeah, I think going to the spiritual aspects Gabe was asking me about, I actually think they all come down to the same thing, right? Which is like a lack of curiosity about the other person, right? So if you do the same, I imagine both of you go on lots of sales demos as well as selling your own business. You're also getting software and services, right, for your business. And I find 90% of the time, if I get on a call, I'm just being given the same pitch they've given to everyone else, right? And I think you have to think beforehand. And now with AI, there's absolutely no excuse, right? You can go, tell me more about this company, tell me about their customers, tell me what's happened recently, give me a summary of the financial report. And then you can come to that conversation and say, if someone's sending to you like, oh, hey, Gabe, Lexi, I saw you did a podcast. That's cool. What guests have you had on recently, right? And then it's like a customized conversation. And then, oh, are you getting leads from your podcast, etc., right? So it's very easy to customize these conversations now. But as I said, like 90% of salespeople are not doing that. And then it's the same thing with a cold call. A lot of people just read the exact same script for every single cold call. They don't listen to the other person. They don't ask questions. So yeah, I think they're different scenarios that you ran through, but I think they all come down to the same issue, which is like a lack of curiosity about the other person.
All right, so you're starting to talk about the good stuff. So let's peel back the onion a little bit, because Cosmic is not just the name of the brand. It's actually a framework that you've created, right? So you're connecting with buyers, as we talk about, emotionally and spiritually. I like the asterisk there. That definitely doesn't lose people, right? But walk us through this core idea, and what does Cosmic actually stand for? What does that look like in practice? Take me through it.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the O, because that's quite an interesting one. You talked about the spiritual one. So the O, the story I always give is Superman in the 70s. The comics became quite unpopular. The sales dropped dramatically. And the reason was that Superman became too invincible. So, like, he just defeated everyone, every enemy, etc. And he became unrelatable, because as humans, we're all imperfect, right? So what they did, they introduced this thing called kryptonite, which everyone says that now. It's a kryptonite. It's the thing that brings us down, and that made Superman more relatable, and the comic sales shot up dramatically. Reason I'm talking about that with open, everyone needs their kryptonite, and we talk about be open, actually about what are the things that you're not good at, right? And that's a real superpower in sales, because most salespeople are saying, oh, we're the best at this, we're the best at this. And you should say, hey, if you're looking for this, this is not what we do well. So like in our case, we know some of our clients are looking for more of like revenue operations, which is more of like tracking the data and all that stuff. And we have partners that do that, but from the start, it'll just be like, look, if you're looking for someone to track on the CRM, etc., the conversion rates, that's not what we do, right? So be very upfront about that from the start. So that's one thing I sometimes say as well, like on the open side. I'm only 37, because I know there's a lot of sales trainers in my space who are like 50, 60. They've been doing this for like much longer than me. So it's me being very open. Hey, like, this is my age. So that's the O. And then the two C's are challenge and consequence. And then they're also related to the spiritual and material, right? So for every buyer you have, you need to think of what are the problems they have, the challenges, and what are they from a spiritual and a material level, right? So like, I can give you an example of a client we work with called Dex, and they sell to accountants. Now, accountants, obviously, they're always thought of as people that are very material, because they're interested in numbers and all that stuff. And what Dex does, it's like a software that you can upload receipts to, essentially. They do a lot of other things as well. So the material side of things that's obviously going to save a lot of time, and your accountants there is going to save money on their salaries, etc., and all that stuff. But the spiritual or the emotional side of that is if they're not having to do that, they can spend more time with their families, right? That would be what we call more of a spiritual benefit to that, and that goes to the consequence. And then the last thing, the I, is the influence, right? So that's essentially, especially if you're doing enterprise, you want to do multi-threading. So you don't want to just be speaking to the CEO or the manager. You want all the layers in between, and we train people on that as well. So yeah, that's Cosmic essentially in a nutshell.
It's awesome. And you've used that framework to, like you mentioned, help Dex double their revenue, help JLL grow pipeline across 3 continents, Operatix cut new hire ramp by 75%. Can you pick one of those, maybe JLL or Operatix, what was that specific problem they had, and what did you do to change that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk about JLL because we do a lot of work with corporate real estate. They're like a big Fortune 500 company in that space. It's quite interesting because they're brokers, right? So maybe you have like a real estate broker you work with if you're like trying to buy a place or rent a place. But they're doing the same thing, but for offices and factories. And a big thing in the world of corporate real estate at the moment is what they call industrial, just because everyone's buying stuff online at the moment. All these companies, they need like huge warehouses to store all their stuff. So yeah, we came in and a lot of the time, like software salespeople who you work a lot with, they were very transactional. Of, hey, do you want to, like, you're in this office or you're in this warehouse, we got a place down the street, do you want to see it? And it's like, I don't know you, right? I'm not going to suddenly like decide I'm going to move office because of you. It's a very emotional decision. So we just did the usual stuff, everything I just talked about there, of working out, do really deep research on your customers, use AI in the right way. Interestingly, a lot of these real estate companies, they have really good content. So that's also another thing of like, so as either of you have great content from this podcast, and I'd actually be using that podcast in outbound approach as well, which I'm sure you do. Like, hey, I noticed this about your company. We did a podcast that is quite similar to a problem you're trying to solve. Would you be open to listening to it? They say yes. You send them the podcast, etc. So we did that with a lot of these like real estate reports of, hey, I saw you're located in downtown Houston. There's been some interesting updates of like the area. Do you want to see the report around vacancy rates, etc.? They say yes. You start a conversation. So that's a lot of our approach, and that's why my marketing background has been useful, because it's like, how can we use marketing content actually not just for inbound leads, but also using marketing content in outbound as well.
I love it. So sales playbooks, you're the best at it. It's something you're known for very much. And a lot of companies have them, right? They have them, but they're sitting on a shelf somewhere. They're getting ignored, collecting dust. So what's the difference between a playbook that actually changes behavior and one that's really not doing anything?
Yeah, I think the big thing is the training piece, because that's the application. So now we've partnered on some projects with the playbook side of things. And if there's not a manager or a trainer or someone like us coming in and training someone how to use a playbook, people will look at it, and sometimes they actually give good feedback. Oh, this is great, but then they never implement anything. And to give you an example, one of the first things we work on with customers, okay, just say an example, they're like, we sell to manufacturing companies. Okay, if you sell to manufacturing companies, what manufacturing case studies or customer stories do you have? Okay, we've got these. Okay, maybe you've got something on your website which is like 2,000 words. If you're an SDR or a or salesperson, you're like, what how do I turn this into something I can use on a call? So what we would do, we would put it into 100 words that you can then talk about on a call, and that's the first thing. Now that could be living in the playbook, but the problem is, still, I found, we'll do a training session, we'll say, what's your top case study here? And they'll be like, oh, I don't know. And then that's where you can pull out the playbook and say, look, your case studies are in the playbook. So the next time someone asks, what do you do on a call? And you're speaking to a manufacturing company, instead of saying something generic, say, well, we worked with another manufacturing company and this is what we did for them, right? So that's an example of like how you actually take a playbook and make it actionable through training.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And you've trained over 10,000 salespeople. What's the most common thing you see that's holding sellers back, that they're completely blind to themselves?
Yeah, I think it's your own mindset, right? So kind of what I was talking about earlier, of, obviously I said there's like the victim mindset, which is you're blaming everyone else for all your problems. Classic, more of a software sales problem, I think, is, oh, marketing's rubbish, they don't give me any leads, right? Where it's like, take your destiny into your own hands. You should see marketing leads as uh a lucky thing that you get on the side. And even if you've got a really good marketing team and they're giving you leads, things happen, right? Like sometimes you get loads of leads from LinkedIn or Google Ads or whatever, and for whatever reason that platform's not working at that particular time. So that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is, sometimes you got two types of personalities for salespeople. So that person I was saying is probably someone who's not going to do a lot of activity. Sometimes you've got another person who is going to do a lot of activity, which can be great. But sometimes that person who's trying to do a lot of activity forgets about the other person. So they've lost that curiosity piece. So generally, really across all of the people that I've trained, I would say I try to identify those two things. Like, is this a will problem where they're just not doing enough work and they're like being a bit lazy, to be frank? Or is it more of a curiosity problem? They're putting the work in, but they're not really curious about the industry, about the customer, about the product, etc., etc. So those are probably the two things that I look at.
Amazing. So you've described yourself, right, as believing that the world of sales is just completely broken. I mean, that's a bold statement, right? But have you had moments where you feel like this is actually fixable? And my question also is around AI. Like, do you think AI is here to help fix it, or do you think it's just going to make it worse?
I think it will make good salespeople better, and I think it will make bad salespeople worse, which it seems to be the case always with technology. It just accelerates every trend. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think like going to a lazy salesperson is just going to be like, okay, send 3,000 emails using this prompt to people, and I'm just going to like sit back and I can work, 1 hour a day and wait for the responses to come back. And then a good salesperson is going to be like, okay, how can I really research every single client I'm going into? So, like every single client I speak to, I'm going to do deep research before every call. Or if you're an SDR, I'm going to do a lot of research on every single person that I call before I cold call them, right? And a good example, I know you're both very active on LinkedIn. I think a good example of AI is LinkedIn, where I think AI is really good for like editing. And I think it's good for giving you ideas, but never get AI just to like, you could get AI now to go on both of your LinkedIn profiles and say, hey, create loads of posts for me. I've actually done this. The post it creates once, sometimes it will lie, right? Just so I've done this and it will just make up these stats that they think can go viral. The second thing, it just sounds robotic. So I recommend like using AI to edit your posts and to give you ideas, but don't get it to write the whole post yourself. Otherwise, it will just sound like AI. It will sound robotic, and it's quite clear now to see which are like the fully written AI posts. So I don't say never use AI for writing, but use it more for editing than for the actual, writing itself.
I mean, it is so clear, and don't you think it's weird because, like, don't the people know that? I mean, when you have, like, long, M dashes and, the word unwavering in your posts and, like, 17
Yeah.
emojis, like, you just know ChatGPT just wrote that for you. So
Yeah.
why do you think people are, like, literally okay? Do they just not know what they don't know? Are they completely oblivious?
I
Or are they
think
just
I think
not
people
being a shit? Like, what do they care about?
Yeah, I actually think people do know in terms of people reading it, but I think the people who are doing those comments and the posts and whatever, I just think they're taking the easy option. This is a great
Yeah.
title for the podcast, right? Do hard things. It's much harder to sit down and like really put your soul into a post versus, hey, AI, you write a post like on something about sales, right? And just going to sound like everyone else.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so obvious, but I think that's really what grows people who are doing it the right way fast on LinkedIn. And it's what we've seen. But running a consulting business means your product is your people and your reputation. When a client engagement doesn't really go the way that you planned, how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's always so. I think it's working out why, like, what's gone wrong essentially, and also is it something. I like the serenity prayer, and I don't want this to be any type of preaching session. I think this is useful for any faith or any, even if someone is atheist, right? Is the Lord grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? And I always talk about that because I think that's a really useful skill in sales, and this is a useful skill in like even like customer operations because it's identifying, okay, was this something that was on us? Was this something that was on the customer that we had absolutely no control about? Or was it like a little bit of both? So that's like the first thing to work out. Okay, if this is on us, what can we do straight away? And I also think a lot of people don't act with urgency as well. Like if you've got like a big customer file, like, you need to address it straight away. So that's also a big thing. And I think a lot of sales skills are like really useful in like the customer side of things as well. So like even I see with like when we build sales playbooks, we're often speaking to like head of marketing, head of sales, head of RevOps, like all these different stakeholders, like industry expert. And then even with my playbook team, I train them. I'm like, oh, we didn't get this information. I'm just waiting for this person. I'm like, well, ask someone else. Like, ask someone else in the company. So, like, the whole thing about multi-threading, contacting different stakeholders, you can do that from like a customer success perspective as well. So.
I love it. So let's wind down and talk about legacy because this is a new venture for you. It's exciting. You just said you're 37. So what is the next journey look like for you, and where do you see this going?
Yeah, so a plug I can give and leave it in the show notes is we just released an online course. So everything up until now has been either myself or one of the training team and our content team to go and work directly with a person. So it involves a human And we've got a course for the start. It's just business development. So, how do you book meetings with people? But we're going to be releasing a course on, discovery, closing, customer success, upsells, etc. And essentially log into the course. There's videos you watch and then you answer questions. So it'd be like, hey, pick a dream account. Hey, I want to target Alley, right? Okay, what's happening at Alley recently? Research, write an email, all that stuff. And then what's cool as well is there is an option where you can have a team license, and then someone on your team could go through that course and you can review the answers of your manager. Or there's like a self-serve option with an AI coach where we've got an AI based on all of the different content that I've done over the years. And there's like a cosmic growth coach that will go in and like give you feedback on your emails, your calls, etc. as well. So that's probably, we just released that 2 months ago. So that's probably like the thing that I'm most excited about at the moment around having this like online product, which is kind of going to switch us from being like a pure services business to having like a bit of a tech element.
I love it. Well, Mikey, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Who in our audience is the right person? Who's your ideal buyer to reach out to you? And what's the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, sure. General revenue leaders. So that could be head of sales, head of marketing, CRO, CMO, etc. Also CEOs as well of generally smaller businesses, probably under 500 for the CEOs. And even, if you're a salesperson, a marketer, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I've got the course I was talking about as well. And yeah, LinkedIn is probably your best bet. And then my email as well is mhanson@cosmicgrowth.com. So yeah, either LinkedIn or email is a good way to get me.
Awesome. Well, Mikey, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Everyone listening, Lexi and I want to ask you to keep doing the hard things, and we will both see you on the next one. Thanks, Mikey.
Thanks a lot.